Let's get more reaction now to the passing of the National Minimum Wage Bill in Parliament. We're joined on Skype by Neil Coleman, co-director of the Institute for Economic Justice. Neil, thanks for your time. We appreciate it. What do you make of the National Minimum Wage Bill before we actually talk any further about it?
Well, Shahan, I just need to disclose the fact that I was very involved in the negotiations from 2015 to 2017, so nearly 3 years of negotiations. So this is the product of extensive discussions. So I think there's a lot of rhetoric out there about what the bills represent, but we need to cut through some of the rhetoric. And one of the things that are of great concern, which is not really being aired in the public debate, is that there was a comprehensive agreement which was reached last year in February 2017 on a package. The national minimum wage is not just about the 20 Rand an hour. There's a whole package of measures that go together with that level, which are very important to understand what the negotiators were trying to achieve. So the level that people are talking about is definitely very inadequate, certainly from the labor movement's point of view and civil society. But there are other issues of concern. So I think it's important to indicate that there were about 9 elements in the package that were agreed in the negotiations last year. The first was that there should be annual increases above the level of inflation. But secondly, there should be a medium-term target which would set benchmarks such as the minimum living level and a certain proportion of the national average wage. And the idea was to progressively improve over the medium term, 3 to 5 years, so that you're not just stuck at that national minimum wage level. Issues such as the incorporation of farm workers and domestic workers into the full national minimum wage, the articulation between the national minimum wage and sectoral determinations and collective bargaining, improving the minimum hourly pay, controlling exemptions, ensuring the independence and capacity of the National Minimum Wage Commission, effective implementation and penalties, and finally measures to address wage inequality. So what is very worrying is that the bills that were presented by the Department of Labour in Parliament essentially roll back many of these elements of the package which was agreed to in 2017. So I think we as negotiators and as part of civil society are very concerned that this package has been seriously undermined.
All right, so if you look at inflation, for example, and this agreement and how it'll work, it has to be above inflation. Inflation stands at 4.5%. Workers who earn 3,500 Rand get an increase of 5% that works out to 350 Rand extra. I mean, to the man on the street, it's not a lot.
Yeah, but currently, Shahan, the legislation doesn't provide for a mandatory annual increase above the level of inflation. This is one of our concerns. All it says is that a package of factors will be looked at, such as growth in the economy, such as the level of inflation, and a range of other factors, such as productivity. And in the end, the National Minimum Wage Commission will determine what the level of the increase is. Yeah. Now, that is not really fair, that those at the bottom of the wage structure should suffer, for example, if the economy doesn't grow, because where is the social surplus going? It's really going to those at the top of the wage structure, to top management, the CEOs, etc., and those at the bottom are the ones who are continuously suffering. So the idea of the national minimum wage as part of a package to reduce wage inequality is that it must progressively improve towards a level at which the gap between the top and the bottom is progressively reduced. So that is why we called the negotiating team the Wage Inequality Task Team, because aiming to reduce the gap between those at the bottom and those at the top. And in fact, Labour placed a proposal on the agenda, which was that there should be a reduction in the ratio between the top 5% and the bottom 5% of earners in every company. There should be a maximum ratio which is stipulated. So, for example, 30 to 1 from those at the top to those at the bottom. And these are the sorts of issues which have not yet been addressed in the negotiations and need to be addressed going forward.
Yeah. Now, SAFTA, of course, is saying that this new minimum wage will legitimize poverty in South Africa. Do you agree with that?
You know, one appreciates the sentiment of those who feel that the 20 Rand an hour is far too low, but the shocking reality is that 4.3 million formal sector workers currently are earning below that 20 Rand an hour figure. You know, the labor movement put forward a figure of 4,500 Rand a month a couple of years ago. So clearly the 3,900 for a 45-hour week or 3,500 for a 40-hour week is totally inadequate. I mean, the minimum living levels now for a family of four is sitting at about 5,000 Rand a month. So this is clearly inadequate. However, the reality is that many workers are sitting below this. So the question now for the labor movement is, how do they unite around mobilizing for a decent national minimum wage and for a strategy to close the apartheid wage gap? I think that's the story that needs to be addressed, not to get stuck in the debate, which is now becoming a bit circular, about whether this constitutes a sellout or whether it constitutes an advance. The reality is that a national minimum wage is now being legislated, and this is a platform around which people should mobilize in order to improve the plight of workers who are earning a poverty wage.
Okay, thanks so much for your insight. Appreciate it. That was Neil Coleman, co-director of the Institute for Economic Justice.